A long emergency rarely starts with panic. It usually starts with confidence. People look at their cupboards. They glance at the refrigerator. Maybe they check the garage. Everything seems fine. We've got plenty. It's one of the most common thoughts people have during the first day. Then something interesting happens. Not everything disappears at once. People don't suddenly run out of food, or water, or supplies. Instead, a pattern begins to appear. Certain items vanish much faster than anyone expected. Not because people are careless, because they use those items every single day without thinking about it. The problem isn't always a lack of supplies. The problem is underestimating how quickly normal routines consume them. That's why experienced households don't just ask, "What do we have?" They ask, "How fast do we use it?" Those are two very different questions. Because a cupboard full of supplies can feel reassuring, until you realize half of it won't even last a week. Let's begin with the item that almost everyone underestimates: water. Most people immediately think about drinking. That's only part of the story. Think about everything water quietly does in a normal day. You brush your teeth, wash your hands, make coffee, prepare breakfast, cook lunch, cook dinner, take medication, wash fruit, clean dishes, fill pet bowls. Even if you're trying to conserve water, those small uses continue adding up. That's why people are often shocked by how quickly stored water disappears. Not because they're drinking enormous amounts, because life keeps demanding water in dozens of little ways. One bottle becomes two, two becomes six, six become an empty shelf. That's when people realize they weren't storing water. They were storing time, and time disappears much faster than expected. The second thing people run out of is prescription medication. This one rarely appears at the top of people's lists. It should. Unlike many pantry foods, medication isn't something you can easily replace with another product. If someone takes medication every day, missing even a few doses can become a serious problem, depending on the condition and the medication involved. That's why many people discover too late that they only had a week's supply, or even less. It's an uncomfortable realization, not because they forgot, because life became busy. Prescriptions became routine. Refills happened automatically, until they didn't. This is one of those supplies that quietly disappears one tablet at a time. Nobody notices the box getting lighter. Then suddenly, it's empty. That's why planning matters. Not because emergencies are guaranteed, because routines sometimes get interrupted. The third item is batteries. Power goes out. Flashlights come out. Radios come out. Headlamps come out. Children's toys suddenly become entertainment again. Portable fans, thermometers, small lanterns. One by one, batteries begin disappearing. The funny thing is that many households own batteries. They just don't own enough of the right sizes. Or they're scattered throughout the house. Half-used, mixed together, impossible to organize. That's why people often think they have plenty, until they actually start using them. Then the reality becomes obvious. The remote controls can wait. The flashlight can't. The radio can't. The lantern can't. Batteries quietly become one of the most valuable supplies in the house, and one of the fastest to disappear. The fourth thing people run out of is toilet paper. It almost feels too obvious to mention. Yet history has shown exactly how quickly it disappears from store shelves whenever people become uncertain. The reason isn't mysterious. It's bulky. People use it every day. Every household needs it. When people begin buying extra, shelves empty surprisingly fast. At home, the same pattern happens. A package that seemed enormous suddenly starts looking much smaller after several days. Then people begin counting rolls. That's when the calculations begin. How many do we have left? How long will they last? Questions nobody normally asks suddenly become incredibly important. And that's exactly why toilet paper belongs so high on this list. Not because it's exciting, because it's used constantly. The fifth thing people run out of is coffee. Anyone who drinks coffee every morning already knows where this is going. Coffee isn't simply a drink. It's part of a routine. People often calculate food carefully. They calculate water carefully. Very few calculate coffee, until the tin feels unusually light. Then suddenly, every scoop matters. Could people live without coffee? Of course. But that's missing the point. Long emergencies aren't only about physical needs. They're also about maintaining a sense of normality. Morning coffee, evening tea. Small routines reduce stress. That's why coffee often becomes one of the first pantry items people regret running out of. Not because it's essential for survival, because it's part of everyday life. The sixth thing people run out of is cooking fuel. This doesn't matter if everything is working normally. The moment normal systems stop, it matters a lot. Portable gas canisters, charcoal, propane, wood for certain types of stoves. People often calculate how much food they have. They forget to calculate whether they can actually cook it. A cupboard full of pasta doesn't help much if there's no practical way to boil water. That's why experienced households think in pairs. Food, and the ability to prepare food. Water, and the ability to store water. Flashlights, and fresh batteries. Every supply depends on another supply. That's one of the biggest lessons people learn during long disruptions. Nothing exists in isolation. And we're only halfway through the list. Because the next 6 things aren't just supplies people use every day. They're the items almost everyone forgets to count until they're nearly gone. If you've noticed a pattern by now, it's because there is one. The first things people run out of usually aren't luxury items. They're everyday items. The things people use so often they stop noticing them. During normal life, replacing them is effortless. You simply add them to the shopping list. Pick them up on your next trip. Put them away. Repeat. But remove that routine, even for a short time, and everything changes. People suddenly discover just how much they relied on supplies they barely thought about before. The 7th thing people run out of is cooking oil. This surprises a lot of people. After all, a bottle of cooking oil seems like it should last forever. Then you start paying attention to how often you actually use it. Breakfast. A little oil in the frying pan. Lunch. A splash for roasting vegetables. Dinner. Another splash for meat, potatoes, or rice. Even baking often depends on it. The bottle gets lighter one meal at a time. Nobody notices because each use is so small. Then one evening someone reaches into the cupboard and realizes there's barely enough left for tomorrow. That's when people understand something important. Cooking oil doesn't just help prepare food. It improves almost every meal. Without it, frying becomes difficult. Roasting changes. Baking changes. Even simple dishes lose something. People often calculate how much food they have. Very few calculate how much oil they'll need to prepare it. That's why experienced households don't just store ingredients. They store the ingredients that make other ingredients usable. The 8th thing people run out of is soap. Not because people suddenly start using more of it, because they finally notice how often they already use it. Think about a normal day. Washing your hands, taking a shower, cleaning after cooking, doing laundry, washing dishes, Soap quietly appears in dozens of routines. When supplies become limited, hygiene doesn't suddenly stop mattering. If anything, it becomes even more important. The challenge is that people rarely keep large reserves. A bottle under the sink, another in the bathroom, maybe one spare. It feels like plenty, until several days pass. That's when households start asking questions they never asked before. Do we really need to use this much? Can we make it last? Those are questions nobody wants to be asking after supplies have already started running low. The ninth thing people run out of is pet food. Millions of people plan carefully for themselves, then completely forget the animals living in the same house. Dogs, cats, rabbits, birds, fish. Every pet depends entirely on the people looking after them. Yet it's surprisingly common for households to have weeks of human food and only a few days of pet food. The reason is simple. Pet food is part of a shopping routine. People buy another bag when the current one starts looking empty. During a disruption, that routine disappears. Suddenly, the family isn't only thinking about feeding themselves. They're trying to feed every member of the household, including the ones with 4 legs. That's why pet food often becomes one of the earliest concerns for pet owners. Not because they forgot their pets, because they underestimated how quickly supplies would disappear. The 10th thing people run out of is pain relief medication. Headaches don't disappear because there's an emergency. Neither do muscle aches, minor injuries, toothaches, or fevers. In fact, stress sometimes makes them feel worse. Most households have pain relief somewhere. The question is how much. One half-empty packet sitting in a drawer feels adequate during normal life, until several people need it at the same time. That's when one packet suddenly doesn't seem very large. The same applies to basic first aid supplies, bandages, antiseptic cream, thermometers. Simple items quietly become important because everyday life continues. People still trip, still cut themselves while preparing meals, still develop headaches. Long emergencies don't pause ordinary health problems. They continue alongside everything else. That's why these small medical supplies deserve much more attention than they usually receive. The 11th thing people run out of is trash bags. Nobody gets excited about buying rubbish bags. They aren't interesting. They aren't expensive. Most people don't even think about them until they need another one. But imagine several days without regular rubbish collection. Food packaging starts building up. Paper towels, disposable plates, empty cans, bottles, general household waste. The rubbish keeps coming. Even if everything else has stopped, trash bags quietly solve a problem people rarely think about. They help maintain cleanliness, organization, and basic hygiene. Without them, clutter appears surprisingly quickly. That's why experienced households often keep far more than they expect to need. Because rubbish never takes a day off. The 12th and final thing people run out of isn't something you eat. It isn't something you drink. It isn't even something you can replace with another product. It's cash. This surprises many younger viewers. After all, most payments happen with phones or bank cards. Normally, that's true. But long emergencies don't always leave systems working normally. Power outages, communication problems, temporary network disruptions. Card payment systems can become unreliable. Cash quietly becomes valuable again. Not because technology failed forever, because having another option is always useful. Experienced households understand something important. Preparedness isn't about replacing modern life. It's about having alternatives. Cash is one of those alternatives. You may never need it, But the day electronic payments become difficult is not the day you want to discover your wallet is empty. We've now covered 12 things people consistently run out of during long emergencies: water, medication, batteries, toilet paper, coffee, cooking fuel, cooking oil, soap, pet food, pain relief, trash bags, cash. Notice how ordinary this list is. That's exactly the point. People imagine emergencies are defeated by extraordinary supplies. Most of the time, they're managed by ordinary supplies that people remembered to replace before they ran out. And that's the lesson that ties this entire list together. The most valuable supplies aren't usually the rarest ones. They're the ones quietly supporting everyday life until the moment they disappear. The final lesson might be the most important of all, because it explains why some households stay calm while others suddenly feel overwhelmed, even when they started with almost exactly the same amount of supplies. At first glance, this list doesn't look particularly dramatic. Water, soap, coffee, batteries, cooking oil. None of those items would make headlines. None of them are expensive. None of them look like the sort of supplies people proudly post pictures of online. And yet these are exactly the things people miss first. That tells us something important. Long emergencies rarely become difficult because of one massive problem. They become difficult because of hundreds of small problems happening at the same time. One missing battery. One empty bottle of cooking oil. One forgotten prescription. One nearly empty tube of toothpaste. Individually, they're manageable. Together, they slowly wear people down. That's why experienced households often look calmer during disruptions. Not because they have unlimited supplies, because they've already solved dozens of those small problems before they ever happened. That creates a huge difference. Let's imagine two families. Both have enough food for several weeks. Both have bottled water. Both have flashlights. At first, they appear equally prepared. 3 days later, things start changing. One family discovers they're almost out of batteries. The coffee is nearly finished. The cooking oil is gone. The rubbish bags have almost disappeared. One prescription needs refilling. The dog food is running low. Stress begins building. Not because of one crisis, because 6 or 7 small problems arrive together. The second family experiences the same emergency. But before it started, they quietly added an extra bottle of cooking oil, an extra pack of batteries, a second bag of pet food, a few spare tubes of toothpaste, another bottle of hand soap. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive. Yet those small decisions completely change the experience. Instead of constantly solving shortages, they simply continue with their daily routine. That's the hidden power of practical preparedness. It doesn't eliminate problems. It removes unnecessary ones. Another lesson hidden inside this list is consumption. Most people know what they own. Very few know how quickly they use it. Ask someone how much rice they have. Many can answer. Ask them how many days it will actually last their family. Far fewer know. The same applies to coffee, soap, cooking oil, toilet paper, even bottled water. People count products. Experienced households count days. That's a completely different way of thinking. Imagine standing in your pantry right now. You see 6 rolls of toilet paper. Is that 1 week? 2 weeks? A month? The answer depends entirely on the household. That's why understanding your own routine is one of the most valuable forms of preparedness. Not somebody else's routine. Yours. Because every family consumes supplies differently. A household with young children uses different amounts than a retired couple. A pet owner has different priorities than someone living alone. Someone working from home uses supplies differently than someone away all day. There is no universal number, only your number. And discovering that number before you need it is incredibly valuable. Another mistake people make is focusing only on food. Food matters. Of course it does. But look back at this list. Half of it isn't food at all. Soap, batteries, medication, cash, trash bags, toilet paper. These are the supplies that quietly keep everyday life functioning. Without them, simple tasks suddenly become much more complicated. That's why the strongest pantry isn't just about calories. It's about supporting a household. Food feeds people. Other supplies help people continue living comfortably. You need both. One without the other creates unnecessary stress. There's another interesting pattern that appears during almost every long disruption. People stop wasting things. Normally, someone might leave a light on without thinking. Use an extra paper towel. Open another packet of wipes. Pour a little too much cooking oil. Throw away leftovers. During a long emergency, those habits change almost overnight. People suddenly become aware of every battery, every roll of toilet paper, every bottle of water, every spoonful of coffee. The strange thing is that those items were always valuable. The emergency simply made their value impossible to ignore. That's an important lesson. Sometimes we don't need more supplies. Sometimes we simply need greater awareness of the supplies we already have. One of the smartest habits experienced households develop is rotation. Not because they're obsessed with organization, because rotation quietly solves multiple problems. Older supplies get used first. New supplies replace them. Nothing sits forgotten for years. Nothing quietly expires at the back of the shelf. The pantry stays fresh because it's constantly being used. That's very different from treating emergency supplies like museum pieces. The strongest pantry isn't one that's never touched. It's one that's constantly refreshed. That way, every item is familiar. Everyone knows where it is. Everyone knows how to use it. Nothing becomes a surprise. Now think back to the title of this video. The first 12 things people run out of during a long emergency. Notice it didn't say the most expensive things, or the rarest things, or the hardest things to replace. It said the first things. That's because timing matters. Running out of cooking oil on day 3 feels very different from running out on day 30. Running out of batteries during the first night of a power outage creates a completely different experience than running out after electricity has already returned. Small shortages often create the biggest frustration because they arrive long before people expect them. That's why awareness matters more than panic. Understanding matters more than guessing. Preparation isn't about assuming the worst will happen. It's about recognizing which supplies quietly support your life every single day. Because when you know what disappears first, you naturally start paying more attention to it. You buy another bottle of cooking oil before the old one is empty. You replace batteries after using them. You pick up another pack of soap while you're already shopping. You refill prescriptions before they're almost gone. Those tiny decisions barely affect your budget, but they dramatically improve your confidence. And confidence is one of the most valuable things you can have during any disruption. In the end, this isn't really a story about 12 items. It's a story about habits. The habit of noticing, the habit of rotating, the habit of replacing, the habit of thinking one step ahead. Because the households that seem the most prepared usually aren't the ones with the biggest stockpiles. They're the ones that quietly prevented the most common shortages before they ever happened. And that's why the first things people run out of are so important. Not because they're exciting, not because they're expensive, because they're the ordinary supplies that quietly keep everyday life moving, right up until the moment they're gone.